Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pathways to Excellence. It is an honor to have with me here Miss Esther Ng, who set off to Cambridge this year to study linguistics, SocDem intern, national Tchoukball champion, and master of the universe right here. Esther, thank you so much for making time to meet me here today.
Thank you for inviting me to be on this channel.
Amazing. Cool. Well, Esther, you're a person of many interesting experiences, and that's one of the reasons why I was fascinated to, well, speak with you. Pathways is a channel about education and educational experiences, and it's super fascinating to have heard about your journey. I mean, and what a journey it is. Like, you are, if I'm not wrong, a part of a MISO. You compete in Linguistics Olympiads. You are the president of the Chinese Language Society of Quencheng.
That was ancient.
That was ancient. Then you went on to, I guess, the Nanyang Junior College in Singapore right there. So, but yeah, so like, what is it that led you, I guess, towards education in general as not saying like a source of refuge, but like why education in general, and how did you think where you are today?
I would perhaps start with how the educational journey came about. So I started on doing my education in a Chinese independent high school. And I also lived in a hostel. So I think when I talk about my academic experiences, that itself is a very large part of living in a hostel, because it was the kind of hostel where you couldn't leave without getting that parental signature or your parent being on the spot there.
Oh my gosh.
So usually I just spend like 5 days on a week in the school compound. So it'll be like school in the morning, in the afternoon we play sports in the school, and then at night we are still in the school. We have the classrooms as like place for us to do revision. But then afterwards, in the night time when we have free time, we can roam around the school compound, but all within the school compound.
Oh my god.
So I guess my academic experience in such an environment was, on the bright side, helped me to be very interested in things on a deeper level, like not just touch on surface level, but go deep into the things you want to explore. Because first of all, the syllabus is also quite rigorous in Chinese independent high school.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
You do 2 syllabuses. Mine does 2 syllabuses. So you have one which is SPM, then you also have the UEC one. So we are doing both at the same time, bilingual at the same time, and I feel like that gave me a lot of inspiration to kind of pursue things on a deeper level, which is also why I'm going to do university in the UK instead of the US. But then afterwards, when I was thinking whether I should do UEC or A-levels, I went on to do A-levels instead because I got the ASEAN scholarship. Because it was full, right? That was the biggest reason.
Okay.
Biggest reason I went to Singapore was because it was a full ride scholarship. At that point, I feel like I was a little bit more towards the rare minority who didn't know exactly, that did not know at all that this scholarship even existed. And I didn't know anyone who had it. I wasn't able to find a lot of information online because all I had was Reddit. And Reddit is just not a very good source. It's good for some like trivia, facts, incidents. Not if you're trying to find actual information. So I heard a lot of horror stories of how junior colleges were like in Malaysia, in Singapore. Yeah, but then I still went on there because I felt like it would be a good opportunity to see how the outside world look like on an international level. And Singapore is always lauded for its education, right? I want to know what made it different. So that's why I went there. And I think also the educational experience there might have invoked in me more sense of purpose to do policy as well as diplomacy.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Well, you're definitely a person of like very diverse interests. I like see you like in a whole bunch of different things right there. And if we were to basically just do a quick rundown of your experiences, you say you are mesmerized by how human language works right there. You enjoy policymaking, as you did mention earlier. Translation is one of your hobbies. Very interesting hobby, I must say.
Interesting discipline.
Interesting discipline, interesting hobby. Well, I guess if we were to think about, well, what is it that has led to such a variety of interests right there?
Well, I think it might be a more innate nature thing. So I am by nature, a person who has a lot of different interests. I see a lot of possibilities in many fields, and I get very excited when I see things like interdisciplinary things, when things intersect. For example, when you do, let's say, policymaking, one of the reasons I love it is because it's an intersection of various disciplines. You cannot consider maybe an economics problem in a silo in itself. You can, but the theory will sound very nice, but it will give rise to a lot of complexities. So I enjoy knowing that the world is intersecting. There's a lot of pathways that can lead to the same. No
Wow.
pun intended.
Wow.
A lot
Love
of
it.
pathways that can lead to the same outcome. For example, excellence.
Wow. Subscribe. All
You
right.
can subscribe and comment.
That's right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I would say having a lot of interests help because they allow you to see the world from many different perspectives, and that's why I keep doing it. But I am trying to rein it in. I do think jack of all trades at least have to be good in some of the trades. So if you split yourself a bit too thin, you might end up with nothing. I'm slowly forming that niche areas of life.
Fascinating. Well, again, congrats on getting to Cambridge to study linguistics because Cambridge is like the home, if I'm not wrong, of the late Ludwig Wittgenstein, who once famously observed, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." And so when I think about, well, you're going in to study linguistics right there, I find that to be a particularly interesting choice. You did mention that it's basically the interdisciplinary things that fascinate you in a whole bunch of different ways. And we also do know that, well, the UK tends to be a place where people specialize in that particular area. And so why linguistics and why not like something else, I guess?
Well, I think it always starts with how you got interested in it first. So I would say, because I like learning about new things, right? So when I was around 14, there was this opportunity to find a club in the school to sign up for as part of your CCA courses. So I was like, what should I do? And I was like, learning a language sounds good. But there were too many people in the Japanese club. So I chose the Korean club.
Okay.
Not because
Deba.
yeah, I'm just choosing the one with the fewer people. So there will be more resources at my per user. And I think that 1 year of learning Korean, afterwards I quit the club because I wanted to pursue it on my own time and my own pace. But that process really intrigued me. Like it was a process of like problem solving, except you see it happening in real life. You know there's an entire population, a culture based around this language. And that's like amazing. And in the process of learning, to see how is this different from your current experiences as a person who speaks Malay, Chinese, English, it really I do agree with the quote to some degree. It really expands your mind because you realize that language is not just how you see in the language you speak itself. You have to consider other people's perspectives. So then I went on to study Spanish also, and I picked it up quite fast. So I would say it was during that time I felt like maybe I might have an affinity for languages. But then I got exposed to the idea of linguistics Olympiads. So at that point in time, I didn't know what was linguistics. I just thought, I do enjoy language learning. And I know it's not because of maybe some people learn languages for the purposes you can use it. I know I like it because of the process of deciphering it. I was like, this sounds like whatever the linguistics Olympiad description was. So I went on to do it. I did it for quite a few years. And then when I went to Singapore, there were more opportunities for research. Because linguistics, I would say in Malaysia, it's still largely a field we would think of correlated with English. So people think of English language and linguistics. And that is kind of like learning a second language. To be a teacher in English, take a linguistics class. That's what people think. But going to Singapore, I've been exposed to a lot of different areas in linguistics. So that includes historical linguistics, as well as the idea of computational linguistics. So when I went down that rabbit hole, I guess, I realized that there were so many questions in linguistics. Like language is such a fundamental part of human. But there's so many, I would say, very basic questions like how do children even learn language? No one has been able to come up with a conclusion, with a set statement of how this works.
Right.
And if you consider the fact that right now we are in the phase where people all look at artificial intelligence, trying to make machines have the cognitive abilities of humans. First, you have to understand the human cognitive mind. How does it work? And language, I think, is a very big part of this. So there's this field of discipline called cognitive science, which has linguistics, philosophy inside. I'm also quite interested in that. But I think mainly if in the future, in the long run, if you truly want to understand how humanity works, how we are kind of like, coordinated, how are we programmed as human beings, I think language is a fundamental part. And I want to be part of the very intellectual discussion looking into these things.
Whoa, understanding humanity. Wow, that's deep right there. But having said that, I think that's really cool. And well, I am curious though. I mean, like, if you were to think about, well, say an interesting, for example, like, or specific linguistic question, that you might find like especially interesting right there. So then, like, what would be an example of that? Because I think that a lot of people don't really have like an exposure really to even like this field in the first place.
And exciting linguistics ideas. Well, there's a lot. I'm having a problem. I would say it isn't really a linguistics idea. It's more like an observation. But I like how in some languages you try to summarize a very unique experience in that particular language. I think German in particular is a very interesting language if you want to feel like what are the abundance of emotions people feel. Because in German, there are a lot of words to describe things that English doesn't have. Like you have to use a whole sentence to describe it.
Right.
For example, deja vu. This is not German.
Yeah, that's
Like
like French, right?
Yeah. You have
Against.
feeling.
Right.
You totally get it. Everyone has it.
Yeah.
But how do you explain deja vu in English?
Right.
That's a problem there. And it's really interesting to see how these words came about and how sometimes we acknowledge that we are acknowledging that this word carries in it all things we need to convey, that we don't bother come up with a new word for deja vu. We
Fascinating.
just use it.
Yeah. And like German has a lot of that, right? Like Weltanschauung
Yeah.
or like Zeitgeist.
Yeah.
And like a whole bunch of like other things of that nature as well. Cool.
Because I think German, it has a lot of compound words. So it allows you to kind of stack on the ideas we have. And that allows you to have quite a big vocab to play around with if you can stack things up to describe.
If I could ask then, well, how do you see, I guess, like understanding linguistics eventually playing into, I guess, like where you like to take yourself in the future?
Well, I suppose when I decided to do linguistics, of course I did consider, more practical things like, okay, what job am I gonna find? But I also felt like it came back to the question of why are you going to university? Are you going there for a job? If you are, why are you even why do you want this particular job? Are you for the money? There are far faster ways to earn money. I'm not really qualified to say this because I'm taking a scholarship to do it. But let's say for your average undergrad who are not scholarship provided, what is the return of investment in going to uni? So when I approach university, I don't think of it as an investment for what I want to do in my future job. I think of it as both soft skills, network skills, but also in terms of mindset really embodied. So studying linguistics, for me, it's a field that it's very common. You and I can understand language once I talk to you about it. But if no one approaches you about it, you generally don't think about it. I learned English by reading. So plain reading, and afterwards only when I had English speaking friends, then I spoke with them in English. And then I kind of correct my usage here and there. But because the main package of English in my head was from reading, I will pronounce some things like how I see it. For example, police. I never knew it was supposed to say police. So there was this one day in my Singaporean school, my friends were like, oh, something, later I call the police. Then, okay, not call the police, but something police. It was not in the usual context. So it's like, police? What's police? And then they're like, there's no way you don't know what's police. And I was like, oh no, they said police. I was like, what's a police? It's like, police? No? Couldn't be. They're like, oh, so they spread it out. I was like, oh, police. And then they're like, oh, police, so endearing. But yeah, so there are things that I pronounce because of the way I learned my English and also because of how I speak my Chinese. But I think it makes me unique. Like, who else speaks police? I mean, there's a lot, but an example.
Okay, interesting. Like, there are probably some trends, but there's also some individual variation, to the point.
So if it's not an important word, if someone else pronounces it differently from I do, I don't care. I just go on with my pronunciation. However, I'm comfortable.
Yeah. Okay, so let's continue. All right. Oh, and incidentally, Esther, so one of the random things that I saw is that you have represented Malaysia for Tchoukball.
Yeah, Tchoukball. That's actually a very accurate pronunciation.
Whoa! Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I have received a vote of confidence from a linguistics major right here. Okay.
Oh, it's correct. Yeah. I'm surprised I genuinely.
Wow. Okay. What is a Tchoukball?
Okay.
If we were to try to I don't know, break it apart right there. So you have a chouk and then you have a ball. I understand the ball thing right there, but what's a chouk?
Okay, so the chouk is actually the sound a ball produces
Chouk.
when it slides through the net. So we have a net ish. It looks like a frame. We call it a frame. And then there's a net where the ball is rebounding from it. So rebound is one of the things that obviously does not sound like choke. But one thing, there's a particular skill or technique inside the sport that relates with like dragging the ball across the net. So your ball will come out 0 degrees, even though it's a rebound. Physics. So the sound it produces is like, so we call it Tchoukball.
Wow, okay, fascinating. Of all the different sports that I guess like you might have gone for, why Tchoukball?
So I used to play badminton in my school. And then I like volleyball, so I play with my friends here and there. But then Tchoukball was because when I went to Singapore, I wanted to do sports still. Sports is like a very integral part of my life. No sports, no work-life balance. I call it my sports life balance.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, so sports was something I was doing in badminton. But in badminton is individually. You could have team, double, that's the most you get, one partner. But then I was looking for a team sport. So coincidentally, my school had this club called Tchoukball, and I was like, interesting, let's do trials. They said, you have good aptitude for this sport. I was like, sure, thanks, I'm joining. I'll join it. And then I started playing for the school. There will be like competitions between schools, right? So I played for the school team. And yeah, and I enjoy the sport a lot. I think there's so much skill to hone in it. My favorite part is it is really mind plus attitude game. So it's like, I'm gonna psych everyone to think I'm gonna shoot there. And in this very short moment of adrenaline, you're gonna feel like I have to make a split choice. It's like football. Where should I defend? Except football has a wider net now. But then in football, it's like if let's say I've been shooting here a lot, my right side, and I've been scoring, you might feel inclined that I should protect here more. So I get that and I shoot to the left of you instead. Now that's very high level playing. I'm not that good yet. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I like it.
Fascinating. Okay. And how can people get involved in Tchoukball?
Okay, so we're actually trying to promote more people to join Tchoukball in Malaysia. It is actually a quite well-known sport. Actually, we do have world competitions for it. Actually, right upcoming in July, I think 26 to 28, somewhere that date, the Asia Pacific Tchoukball Championship is going to take place. So there are teams like Singapore, Malaysia, China, Thailand, and then it's the Asia one. So I did the Southeast Asia one. We also have a national one. And after you get into like, you qualify for it, you can do the world international one. So it's quite popular in Switzerland, Italy, France, these Western countries. In Southeast Asia, I would say Singapore is the leading one. So that's also making sense, like why they are start to pick up Tchoukball. In Johor, it's also growing traction. But in general, we are trying to promote it in the education field for secondary schools and primary schools in Malaysia.
Wow.
Because first of all, it's a sport that requires really low investment. A basketball court would do. We just have to draw using chalk, what we call forbidden zone. And we need the frame, and we need balls. And we don't have to build a specific venue for it. Secondly, it's non-contact, no violence involved. And thirdly, it's a sport after all. Everyone's gonna gain something for sports. Tchoukball, your only investment is buying knee pads. That's all. And the occasional tape for your fingers.
Okay.
And lastly is because it is, I would say, a sport that Malaysia has a lot of potential in being good at. Because in this sport, being short is a disadvantage, being tall is a disadvantage, normal height is okay. So when you kind of like compete with foreign teams, it's really about the skills. In Malaysia, we are currently lacking people playing Tchoukball because it's not known enough. But it's really easy to get on hand. We're actively doing the publicity. But let's say if you're interested in Tchoukball, you can promote in our school, be good at it, then join the national team, then represent Malaysia in national competitions.
Wow.
That's
Get to Cambridge as well.
I don't think they look at my Tchoukball resume for that, but yeah.
You have a Tchoukball resume then?
Not like a Tchoukball resume, but like I started in 2022. I was in the school team, then I joined a Singapore club for it under Punggol. And then now I'm playing for the Malaysian national team. So I did the Southeast Asia one. I'm going to play for the Asia one. So that's like your, what you did in sports.
Wow.
Compared to badminton, how hard is it to play for Malaysia in badminton? And let's say if you want to do sports, you want to explore the competitions, Tchoukball is a very good avenue. We have a lot of competitions, not enough players.
Can you play Tchoukball at Olympics?
This is a very interesting question. It comes with a little bit of a politics reason. So I talked to this expert who represents Malaysia on the UNESCO Youth and Sport Task Force to talk about sports in Malaysia. And actually, sports is a very integral part of our policy and politics. So one of the reasons why it is probably not very likely Tchoukball will make it to the Olympics yet is firstly, for a sport to qualify in the Olympics, there are two kind of the main criteria. One is that there's a big audience there. A lot of people will love to watch it. Right. The other one is it's a kind of like exclusive sport. It's expensive to play. And therefore, on the Olympics, let's say, right, snowboarding, skiing, who can afford, especially if you're from countries with no snow, afford to go to somewhere with snow and train for it. So it's a very expensive sport, very elite sport. But the more the elites who are playing this, the more revenue you get. It's a good earning thing to put on the Olympics. So there are these politics. I would say Tchoukball is a very friendly sport. It's like it's like your everyday sport. You can just play for fun, no pressure. It's not like it's very high end also, because you don't have to kneel to get the ball. Maybe you're like, oh, this doesn't look good on me. I don't know, but it's a bit hard for it to get to Olympics so far. But I think right now in the international part, Malaysia is faring quite okay. Actually. We stand in the middle. For Southeast Asia, we got silver medal. Yeah, gold medal Singapore. Singapore is good at it because they invest a lot in it, and their government is supporting it. So Malaysia, yeah. So if you're interested, can check out at Genesis Tchoukball. That's right now the main club, I would say, running the publicity and training.
All right, cool. All right, and that is Tchoukball. Joy Tchoukball, friends. But I mean, if you were to think really about what aspects of linguistics fascinate you, and like what are some things that you'd be interested to maybe like learn more about?
Well, I have thought of what are the papers I want to take. So in Cambridge year 2, you get to choose papers. One of them is definitely computational linguistics. So the intersection between computer science and linguistics. Under it, that includes your natural language processing, which is what allows people to develop large language models like ChatGPT. Oh, and also machine translation. That's I would say these two are currently something I'm more inclined to explore from a linguistics perspective. But that being said, computational linguistics actually has more inclination towards computer science, and linguistics is like an add-on knowledge. So
I see.
I also am thinking about language processing in terms of in the cognitive mind, but also I think there's a lot of room for linguistics to grow in many different areas. So I might just see which area lacks attention and maybe work on that idea. Yeah.
I see. Cool. It's fascinating that you mentioned like machine translation right there, because like, on your LinkedIn profile, you specifically mentioned that translation is one of your hobbies right there. So then like, do you feel that there is a prospect that maybe like one day you will end up automating yourself away?
Well, let me give context. So the first job I wanted to do was a translator. I was very excited when I discovered that you have translators and interpreters. I told my mom, it's like, I want to be a translator. And that time I didn't know the difference between translation and interpretation. So I was like, I want to be the one like in the United Nations.
Right. Right.
It's like cool and all, but you do know you're gonna get replaced by AI, right? And I was like,
Whoa, how many years ago was that?
when I was 14, 15.
When you're 14, 15, your mom was all like, daughter, you're gonna get replaced by, oh my gosh, like Esther's mom, like wow, you are next level. Shout out to Esther's mom. Okay.
During that time, there was a lot of talk of how automation may replace people, and Google Translate was already around, just not accurate. So I was young. I kind of really ditched the idea because my parents said so. So I pursued some other disciplines of interest, which is what led to all the policy making. But then, when I was coming back to what I actually want to do in university, I thought of linguistics again. I thought of translation. So translation is a hobby of mine because I would say I feel very attracted to languages. That's why I said I feel like I have an affinity for it. I'm quite sensitive to it. For example, when somebody speaks, I do form a lot of ideas on the way they speak. It's very neutral. It's not like a judgment. It's more like an observation. Oh, so this person speaks like this. This person inclines towards here. And as we gain a little bit more experience, sometimes people start making some deductions. Your accent, what does it tell about you? So someone has been telling me I have a Singaporean accent. I leave that up to the audience to decide.
Wow.
But yeah, because I myself was a person who grew up in a Chinese household, did Chinese education under the independent school. And then when I went to Singapore with my English, I dare say that I could speak English, you could understand it, but there's a very heavy accent. I fumble with it. But now I'm able to express it quite fluently in whatever I want to say.
I
And I think it's a very important skill set. to say truly, to make sure language conveys what you're trying to say. And translation is the bridge that helps you to do that when we speak different languages. So there's this book called Babel. I do recommend it by R.F. Kuang. Basically, it does talk about translation, and there's a very important concept in it where outside of the field, people may think that translation is just, if you can speak Chinese and English, you can translate. But that's not really the case sometimes. Even in everyday conversations, there are certain words and nuances where you have to think of what exactly is the best word to use and not just any synonym. Even in synonyms, there are differences. I do think there's a difference between beautiful and pretty.
Then, if I were to ask you, are you an adherent to what is called the strong form of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis?
No, I am not.
You're not.
No, I'm not. I don't really
For
think
context,
that.
by the way, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the idea that basically the language that you speak, essentially, or the language that maybe that you operate in, I have a future linguistics major right here. The language that you think or the language that you speak influences or entails an influence upon the way that you think.
Yeah, I think at the most extreme form of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, people think that your language will define the way you think. Which a very simple example can bring is you experience deja vu, even if you don't speak French. So not knowing how to express it does not mean I cannot think like it. Just that there might not be a word for it yet, or you might not know it exists. But some part of the world, someone might have it in their vocabulary. So I don't think that language determines how you think. It's a tool for you to express what you want to say. And translation is the tool, the plus version across languages.
Wow.
So I have a lot of respect for translation work. I think it comes with all the translators, students, and interpreters out there. They have a better appreciation of languages in terms of actually how difficult this task is.
Yeah. And like you did, if I'm not wrong, H3 translation.
No, history game theory.
H3 game theory. Ooh, H3 game theory and then H2 translation.
Yeah, I just did translation because there's no history.
Fascinating. Okay then. So like, well, you have involved yourself in a lot of different policy making thingamabobs right there. Like for example, you were an intern at my constituency.
Coincidence.
My constituency. Thank you for the work that you have done right there.
No
But yeah, so like well, Esther was an intern actually for YB Rajiv Vishakaran, who basically runs my constituency. So shout out to YB for the work that you're doing. You recently also interned at Social Democracy Malaysia as well, along with Kusha and many other good people as well. But yeah, so like how do you feel that maybe like the policy making side of you kind of like interfaces with I guess like the linguistic side of it? Because like that internship is not the only thing in which you're involved. You're also involved in Y Politics, if I'm not wrong, as like a content writer, and also in MyDiplomacy as well. So then what is it that I guess connects these interests together, or are they kind of like, operating in separate spheres?
Honestly, that's a question I get a lot, especially during the job interview thing. People ask, how do you think your degree is going to give you skills? I do not have a direct answer to that because linguistics is studying how language works. It does not make you a better person to use language. Like could be monolingual with linguistics. That's perfectly fine. So I would say it's more towards the side where I see them as separate fields. But there are occasions where I do see, a hint of linguistics here and there. It's not really like applicable, especially when it comes to policy making and diplomatic texts. You have to be very nuanced in the word choice. How are you phrasing this? What will you sound like when you phrase it in this way versus the other way? It has a lot of implications in your advocacy process, right? Because I don't have an example at hand, but it's just when you're doing work where you use the written language to describe something abstract, then to create out like policy. You have to be careful in the words you choose. It's a little bit like law, where maybe a bad word choice, missing out something, might mean, I'm now not under this term and I find this loophole in law. So I'll say sometimes I'll think like, oh, maybe I'm a little bit more sensitive towards language because I did linguistics. But I don't think that's generally true. I think you still need the professionals in the discipline to do it. And linguistics is like my Roman Empire. Is it that way?
Roman Empire, wow.
Not sure.
Fascinating. Okay. If we were to sort of think about this way in which I guess like linguistics kind of plays into other areas right there. Well, you mentioned translation as like one field of study, and also computational linguistics as like another area that you could potentially go in as well. Well, do you feel that at some point there will be a time when what was your Roman Empire, essentially, intellectually speaking, will eventually become something that informs, I guess, like the professional side of like what you choose to do?
I think ideally, I do hope in the future I can do something that's still related to linguistics. But I'm perfectly fine with the idea that, it's a phase in life where I was into linguistics. I have a next phase in life because there are many things in life to explore.
Okay, fair.
Like, even now, I'm exploring so many different fields. I do feel like even if you change to do something else, not linguistics related, which I see a lot of people after university, they don't actually do what their degree practices. It's still somehow embedded in the way you do your things, your thinking, your mindsets. So I'm very content with the idea that linguistics might not be in my future anymore. And I also don't want to guarantee that, I am definitely going to be a linguist for the rest of my life. Because right now, I think at this age of like going to university, who are probably your target audiences, people are interested in a subject area, both because you have exposure and also because you are somehow good at it. You get a lot of positive feedback, and indirectly it makes you feel like, oh, this might be my calling. But then future in life, you might see more things, experience more things. You might feel like there are higher priorities in life. I think that's completely acceptable. So I'm just going with the flow.
Ah, okay, wonderful. Cool. Out of curiosity, right? Just total curiosity.
Yeah.
So like one of the things that you mentioned earlier is that like you analyze language, like every single sentence and various other things of that nature.
Okay.
If you were to analyze like every single sentence I've like said to you so far, like what is your assessment?
Okay, I don't analyze every single sentence. I take a general idea. I would say, well, one of the observations is you have a lot of things going in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So when you speak at a fastest pace, so
Okay.
you can get it all out,
Yeah.
and give time to structure the next phase. But what I think is good is that you do try to structure it. Because some people have a lot of thoughts and they just go everywhere, quite rubber.
Okay.
It requires practice to structure it properly so people don't lose attention when you start speaking.
Gosh, wow. Like
Yeah.
analysis.
I'm not gonna comment on accent. I'm terrible with accents. I have no idea what kind of accent I'm doing. But yeah, generally, I would say your speed of talking is one thing that stood out to me.
Ah, okay. Oh wow, thank you. Cool.
And also, you have this tilt. So in terms of waves, I think you said like, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Pathways to Excellence. I am Victor, and today we have with us a guest.
I'm so called out right
And
now.
yeah, I talk more monotonously. I got feedback from teachers. They say like,
Did you?
yeah, they were like, when you talk, it's a bit monotonous. It's a bit like I kind of like lose attention. So it was something I was trying to like work on. I'm not sure if it is still monotonous, but when I get carried away with trying to say what I want to say, I'm so focused on getting it out and structuring it nicely so you get my point that I forgot sometimes people need it to sound good.
Ah, I see. Fascinating. Okay, interesting. Then maybe related, but not completely sure if it is related right there. There was actually an interesting conversation that was going on the other day in my friend's entrepreneurial group. So then he was saying something around these lines. So the people who are bad at using AI are the people who are bad communicators. So like what do you think about that?
I don't have the full context, but I would say, first of all, being bad at something might just mean you don't have enough experience, exposure, accessibility to using AI.
Well, specifically like in the context of like large language models, for example. So like there's this idea of like prompting and like speaking to AI models, that kind of thing.
Well,
What are your thoughts on that?
I can think of people who I feel like they are very good with expressing what they want to say, but it might not come out nicely in terms of writing prompts. I think, okay, to concede that you do have to understand how AI works, what are the things they latch on. So very specific instructions. But at the same time, there's this distinction between verbal expression and written expression.
Mm.
So I'll say it's like a storytelling skill. I think I'm a better verbal expresser than I'm on written word. So my written word just looks quite off, kind of like normal, doesn't stand out. But I do imagine that people who may be good with the written one are your standard applicants to US universities. You have to write out like responses to questions, prompts, right? You have to make it in a very engaging manner. And that's your skill of communicating. When it comes to I guess I wouldn't want to say being bad with AI is bad with communicating. I think communication happens on a lot of levels. And I have no professionalism to judge that.
Okay. Fair,
Sudden step down from the argument.
Okay, fair. As you kind of like move onward to the next phase of your life, I guess like what do you feel are some like key lessons that you've learned so far, whether academic, professional, or like otherwise, right? That you feel like have been most impactful to you.
I'll say two things. The first one is actually my work in MyDiplomacy. So for context, MyDiplomacy is an NGO, a Malaysian youth. It's called Malaysian Youth Diplomacy, and it advocates for youth-led diplomacy. So in Western countries, this practice is quite popular. You are trying to incorporate youth voices into your political discussion. In the formation of your country's policy, youth voice is important because technically the impacts lie on them. So they should have a say. In Malaysia, we are trying to make steps towards there. So involving youth in more of these processes. But foreign affairs, because it involves so much with national security, national interests, it's very nuanced. You need to have a lot of practice in it. And therefore, right now, it's still a very, I'll say, stagnant field in Malaysia in terms of access to youth. So that's what this NGO works about. And I've been with them since 2021. So they were also the first NGO, the first society thing I got involved in. So that had a very large impact on me, both because of, I wouldn't talk about the knowledge side, because in every field you get to learn something, right? Maybe more on the skill side. To do diplomacy, you require a lot of stopping and rethinking. Is this what I should be saying? Being more tactful in what you say and what you do also. So I don't know if it helps, but I think generally I'm very comfortable with, taking things at my pace, making sure we settle things properly, no conflict, execute what I am trying to tell you. But if you are not happy with the idea, I assess it rationally. If what you're saying is valid, if it's not, then we are just going to part ways, and I completely accept that. So I think diplomacy has formed me into someone who is more at peace with myself,
Wow.
you could say. Yeah, I mean, a lot of peace in myself, no inner conflict.
That's like so interesting because when we think about diplomacy, we think like contentious issues like US and China and the occasional Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin hanging out in a car together, like best buddies, road trip type thing right there. And so it's so interesting that like, well, diplomacy has come out as a source of peace to you. So
Ultimately, I think what makes diplomacy different from just plain advocacy is you understand that the conflict happens because both of us have different ideals.
Mhm.
And then diplomacy is like, let's try to reconcile that without using conflict. And if you apply this into everyday life, it's just this understanding that everyone is formed of their own beliefs and understanding. Sometimes you can change it, sometimes you cannot. What's the approach? What is the approach you'll take to deal with it? I do agree that sometimes we need more drastic approaches to it. But at least the things I'm dealing with right now, it's more of a conversation to make sure, after I tell you the big picture, are you still thinking that this is an impossible thing? If it is true, then I have nothing. What else can I do? Save from remaking your life and let you experience the stuff. No, right? So there's really no other way. But if you do, if it's just because of lack of understanding of how things look like from my point of view, then there's something to work with.
fascinating. Okay, cool. Then I guess could you maybe share with us like the general types of professional interests that you'd be interested in? Like they need not necessarily be related to linguistics per se, but like what kinds of things are you interested in at the moment?
So on a professional level, maybe let's just make it into like potential fields I see myself working on. One's definitely computational linguistics. On the flip side, translation. So it's more for when I graduate, let's see how AI is doing with language. If it's doing well, let me just dive into that and perfect it. If it's not doing well, let me just continue to work on maybe interpretation and translation on a higher level. when it comes to very sensitive processes like politics and laws, it's unlikely we are going to rely completely on AI to do it
Oh,
when
yeah.
there are high stakes.
Yeah, and like even right now, I think like companies like Meta, like even like have human reviewers to basically like deal with a lot of different things, right? And like there's like also like the whole like deep fake thing.
Oh
right
yeah.
there.
So okay, so those are potential paths related to linguistics. I'm related to it, perhaps more on policy and international relations. So because diplomacy is part and parcel of international relations, they are so interlinked together. And I refrain from talking about my knowledge of international relations on when I was talking about diplomacy just now, because I work with a group of very professional people. They are trained in the background. So that's why I gain more skills. I do gain the knowledge, but right now I feel like I have not been able to produce an insight of my own. So I'm keeping it in the future when I go to other countries, for example, to the UK, see what people think of it, be able to consider more perspectives. So I do have my own thoughts on some international issues, but I don't feel like I'm qualified enough to be professional in it. So one thing I have in mind is a master's, the Strasman Scholars at Tsinghua. I like that program a lot. And if I'm done with linguistics, I feel like I don't want to proceed in this path. This is something I want to.
Ah,
And I love the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy.
okay. Admit her.
They were the first institution to let me do an internship. That's why
Wow.
to them.
Fascinating. Okay.
And maybe a last professional interest is actually more in the startup and entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
So social enterprises was what I wanted to do at first because of the social impact it could have at the same time. But right now, I think startup itself is a very interesting thing to look at this. So
Mhm.
yeah, so these are some of the big things.
Fascinating. Thanks for sharing. Well, as you kind of look forward, what do you feel might be some ways that you might want to potentially give back to the, I guess, like community around you, whether it's like Malaysia or like anywhere else in the world as well?
Okay, so when I do work, I mean, I do some work there are to develop my own professional skills. So like up and coming, I'm going to do business development intern. Entirely no idea how a business develops, but that's like my own skills.
Mm.
But in terms of the skills I already have, so I try to work in fields where I know whatever output I do, it relates back to society. So interning at SocDem is one of the things. Because if we manage to push out the policy papers we are so interested in, it is something that is supposed and targeted to make Malaysia a better place for all Malaysia. And even in MyDiplomacy also, right now I'm acting in the position of a capacity building secretary. So that comes because I was in this field totally as someone without a background in it. And I feel like capacity building is an important thing for youths at least. If I can't contribute to, the big discussions because I don't have an international relations background, doing youth empowerment on the ground is just as important in my opinion. So that is right now one of the things I have to work back. But I have ideas, but it's not done yet, should I say it?
Sure, by all means.
So I am currently also working on a few like ideas on my own to start my own ideas. One of it is actually also a bit like capacity building, skills building. It's more of an internship thing. So you know how graduates or even undergrads of different degrees, you find it hard to break into other fields. Because they usually would say, for example, business development, right? Bachelor's in business, at least heavy. So what if I am a student of history and I just want to know about business? It's no longer the world where I'm a professional and I settle everything. You need interdisciplinary skills. So I was thinking maybe a platform that will be beneficial for both companies who are willing to share this theoretical knowledge ideas they have, make it into like modules. So it's similar to EDX, similar to Coursera, but those are very, I would say, Western centric. Some of the things they teach are not applicable for our society in Southeast Asia as a whole. And there's a ridiculous amount of fee to pay if you convert it to Malaysian ringgit. So I think it's also in a sense not helping the gap. So for this initiative I had in mind is maybe bridging people to internship opportunities by companies who are interested to hire interns. Sometimes the consideration they have is like, if I already know how to do this, why do I have to spend time to teach you and let you do it when I can just do it myself? So for companies with this mindset, we try to help them build the modules for their interns so they get the basic entry knowledge for the fields. And this helps in terms of when you talk about upskilling also, because it allows you to transition to different industries. That's just a big idea. There's a lot of like nitty-gritty things to do, but I'm hoping to at least have. I don't know if it should be an initiative or a startup, but I am using the idea of an MVP to produce first. So that's one way I feel like I want to contribute back to society
Wow.
in terms of what I've observed. And also, the other one would be an initiative ongoing. It's called Diplomacy Abroad. So this happened when I was in Singapore studying. I met a lot of Malaysians. They are educated, they have the skills now, and they are usually in Singapore because better opportunities, right? So your typical brain drain. So perhaps what I was thinking, right?
No, sorry, go on.
So perhaps what I was thinking was like, especially when it comes to diplomacy and international relations, if you are talking about to have more youth voice, what's the ministry's concern? You are not professional enough compared to me. I know more than you do. So what I should do to overcome this is either I build people with the skills or I find people with the skills and willing to do it, just they don't have access to it. Because there's so many like processes you have to go through. So Diplomacy Abroad is an initiative to engage diaspora abroad so that they know of the opportunities Malaysia has, especially in the country. So like let's say Singapore. Let's say if today there was a summit inviting Malaysians to speak about certain things. Actually, Malaysians in Singapore would be completely qualified to talk about it if this is under their discipline. Because they experience these two countries. They know how it's like. And to some degree, I feel like diaspora is technically like a cultural ambassador in other countries. People will define the country based on how you are. If you are the only Malaysian being, they'll be like, oh, I know this Malaysian, he's how and how and how. And that's the idea people have of the country. So I do think that allowing diaspora to be still part of the conversation both helps in terms of engaging them back to the home country and also in terms of just like better cultural diplomacy initiatives. So I did that in Singapore. That was the very first edition. We are planning to expand it a little bit more. So when I go to the UK, hopefully we will roll out more of this in the UK.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. I'm about to ask you a dangerous question. You okay? Alright, cool. You've been involved in a whole bunch of different internships. Recently, you of course had your SocDem internship, hashtag impactful. In 5 seconds, answer the following question. Who is your favorite SocDem intern? 4, 3, 2, 1.
Lalita. So, okay, the reason why I had such a hard time was that on what dimension were they the best in? In terms of working professionalism, that's one. In terms of attitude towards life, but unrelated to SocDem, that's one. Also, Lalita is actually no longer an intern. She was an intern, but now she's kind of like the operating director of SocDem. I think, wow, shout out to her. I mean, I
Shout
love
out
Kusha,
Lalita.
but Kusha is the founder, right? So, but Lalita and Kusha are on the same level of like, in terms of hierarchy, if it even exists in SocDem. What I think is the most I learned about in terms of her in this position is that because she is working in the tech field, but she's just working on SocDem because she believes in the cause. And I think generally that itself is my takeaway. You can completely be in one thing and do something else that is not directly beneficial, but they align with what you want to do. So maybe one is your livelihood and one is the impact you want to create. I think it's perfectly fine and even quite admirable to have people who, balance both the pragmatic benefits and also the ideal thing they want to pursue in life. So, but I love all the interns.
Hashtag touching.
Now this is looking like a publicity video for SocDem.
Oh.
Do check out Social Democracy Malaysia.
Yes.
The newest think tank
It's
in
at
Malaysia.
SocDem.my. Hold on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
you
earlier.
can insert it.
Alright then. Okay then, as we come to the close of this interview right here, thank you so much for your time so far. What do you hope will be your legacy upon this planet?
Of course, I hope that I have big dreams to change the world. As I grow older, I realize that on many different dimensions, people are changing the world. So I would say when I'm no longer here, I hope at least I'm remembered. So to leave something that people will remember me. It may be like an impact I had on someone because I was a role model, hopefully, or because like I gave them advice that was needed and it was accurate for them. And then like it managed to change their life to some degree. And sometimes they might think, oh, there's this person called Esther, and that's enough for me. Yeah.
Amazing.
I
Cool.
think so.
Alright. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, I hope that you'll get your hashtag dream legacy right there. And yeah, so thank you so much for this interview.
No problem. And I also, to add a leaving note, I do encourage everyone who has niche interests to pursue it. So if it's not very mainstream, like Linguistics Olympiad, no one knows what the heck is a Linguistics Olympiad. But you are interested in it, then just go and do it. Because you never know what will turn out of the path. As mainstream might not always be the best.
All right, cool, amazing. Thank you.